The Heritage Foundation, which is one of the co-sponsors of the Values Voters Summit, would you please welcome Becky Norton Dunlop.
Well, good morning. How's everyone doing this morning? Fabulous. We love to hear that from people like you. Well, it is my privilege this morning to introduce to you two people you know very well. But since I get the honor of introducing them, I'm going to proceed and do that. The first person I'd like to introduce is Mark Levin. Mark and I have known each other for a number of years. He says he was 23 when we first met, and that means it's been a couple of years. But Mark is a hero to many of us who love liberty and hate tyranny. And if you don't have that book in your library, be sure to get it. Mark graduated from Temple University in the Philadelphia area, got his law degree there. You know that was tough to do. He ran for office as a young man, very young, before he was 23, and was elected to the school board. So he's been on that side of the house, let's say. He's a Reagan veteran. He knows what it means to work for a president who loves liberty and fights for it every day. He is, of course, a very celebrated talk show host. How many of you listen to his talk show? And don't we learn something important every day? That's the great thing about Mark's talk show. He teaches, he exhorts, he encourages, and he warns us of what to watch for. He is going to be coming out on the stage to have something unusual occur. He actually is going to be interviewed. And he's going to be interviewed by someone else you know very well, Tony Perkins. Now, I know you know that Tony is the president of the FRC, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew he served in the Marine Corps, which means he knows how to strike through the position and take the next hill. He is a dad, and so he knows how important the future is. And I think he and Mark Levin are going to have a very good time with you this morning talking about the future, what we need to be concerned about, and what we need to do to make sure the future for our children is bright. Thank you all very much, and let's welcome the Tony and Mark Show.
Well, good morning. Welcome to the Mark and Tony Show. Actually, I'm going to do the interview, and Mark, I guess it's appropriate. You sit on my right, I guess.
Hope I don't fall off the stool in front of everybody. Yeah. How is everybody? On a Saturday morning, God bless you all for being here. It is so crucially important that you are here because our values are under attack on every front and in every way. And let me say this as a Jew. Thank God for evangelical Christians. Among the most patriotic people I know. Patriotic for America, where you stand in the line and you fight for our values, and so supportive of our little ally, Israel. Thank you very much.
Well, Mark, some big news from Capitol Hill this week.
Nancy Pelosi resigned?
No, they renamed 25 post offices.
There you go. After Barack Obama?
Well, I'm sure you have some thoughts on yesterday's news that House Speaker John Boehner has announced his resignation from Congress. What does that mean?
Well, it's a great day. That in part is what it means. But here's the problem. They're like zombies. There's one after the other, after the other, after the other, and they just sort of replace each other. The next one in line. So that's good news, but I think you are concerned about the next step. So who replaces John Boehner? And I want to... Yeah. Oh, I'm sure that'll happen. And I don't mean to be offensive, but Kevin McCarthy, really? Kevin McCarthy is Eric Cantor with 10 less IQ points. And I say that because I'm concerned about it. And I'm concerned that the Republicans don't learn their lesson on Capitol Hill. They live in a cloistered environment. They talk to each other. They're very friendly with each other, except for about 40 of them, who are the true conservatives. And you and I were to be managed. They're to position themselves. They have to message us, things of that sort. We are smarter than the leaders of the Republican Party. We are better than the leaders of the Republican Party. We understand what's going on in this country, and we are sick and tired of them funding the Obama agenda.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. The factors that led up to John Boehner making the announcement that he was resigning. That didn't happen in a vacuum. In part, it is because we're seeing this even in the presidential election. We saw it here this weekend, where we see candidates who are running for president who have never been in the political process at the top of the polls. People are tired of not the Republicans losing, but the Republicans not fighting.
They're actually tired of the Republicans winning in some ways. About 40 years ago, Ronald Reagan said at CPAC that it's time for a new Republican Party. And I've talked about this on my program many times. That's long overdue. It's time for a new Republican Party. A Republican Party where the candidates say what they mean on the campaign trail and come back to Washington and do what they said on the campaign trail. And I want Eric Cantor to know, since he came out of Manhattan over the weekend in order to defend his friend John Boehner, I want you to know something, Mr. Cantor. We fully understand how our government works. We fully understand that you guys just have the House and the Senate. And we fully understand that when the Democrats just have the House and the Senate and there's a Republican president, somehow they know what to do. Somehow they get things done. Your day is past. Get out of the way. Let some energetic conservatives who really mean what they say do what they need to do. I am tired of people who say we can't. It's not like they're in some foxhole in Afghanistan fighting that enemy. They're here in Washington, D.C. They have constitutional powers. They need to exercise that. Don't tell us that we're not going to shut down the government. You put those bills on his desk and let him shut down the government. And he may have a pen, and he may have an Obama phone, but we have a Constitution. Now use it.
That's right. Do you see, since 2010, when the Republicans regained control of the House, now they have the Senate, we've seen increasing margins of Republican. But we've also seen an ideological shift where we have more conservative members. However, it's not been reflected in the leadership. Are we at a tipping point?
I think we've tipped. I think we've tipped hard left. I think we are holding on to our republic by our fingernails. I think we're holding on to our Constitution by our fingernails. And I think that's why so many people here are furious and frustrated. We are patriotic citizens. We're voting for people who say they're going to represent us. We're contributing to people who say they're going to represent us. We give them the entire United States Congress. Then we hear they need 60 Republicans in the Senate. They're not going to get 60 Republicans in the Senate. The numbers just don't work. Then they say they need the presidency. The last time we had the presidency, the House and the Senate, we blew spending off of the lid. We expanded the size of the federal government. When they win, the Constitution's in danger. When we win, the Constitution's in danger. So what we need is a movement of constitutionalists, people who love this country, people who insist on enforcing the Constitution of the United States. And if it means the government is shut down for 3 weeks, then by God, the government shut down for 3 weeks. And by the way, the government never shuts down. Try to shut the government down.
It doesn't work, but it doesn't shut down.
It just doesn't stop. And try shutting down any department or agency of the federal government. This is the way they talk in Washington. When they say government shutdown, it's 17% of the government. But they're shutting down coal mines, they're shutting down steel mills, they're shutting down assembly lines, they're shutting down farmers, they're shutting down small businesses, and they're 100% shut down. Let the government shut down, and let us continue to live as free human beings.
I want to, before we finish, I want to get to the presidential election and what we should be looking for in a candidate. Given the state of our nation, what are the qualities that we must have? And this is not a typical election where we just get a Republican who will stop the bad stuff. I think we've got to get a Republican who will undo the bad stuff. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you and get your thoughts on this. We're at I think as John Boehner has announced his resignation, there is this zone that we go through here for the next 30 days where some bad stuff could happen. What do we need to be watching for?
First of all, I love these articles that John Boehner is courageous. Now, you liberal journalists and rhino sycophants out there, you want to see courageous? You go to Arlington National Cemetery. That's courageous. You want to see courageous? You go to the police memorial here in Washington, D.C. You want to see courageous? You go to Walter Reed. That's where courageous is. Don't tell me some Speaker of the House is going to retire on a 25-year pension and then go to K Street and make $1 million or $2 million is courageous. One thing John Boehner is not is courageous. Now, what do we look for in a presidential candidate? In my view, we look for what we've always looked for. A conservative constitutionalist, somebody who's fiscally responsible, somebody who openly embraces the values and beliefs of this nation and the principles of this nation. And let me be as clear as I possibly can. Yes, this nation was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. Yes, this nation is a Western enlightened nation. Yes, this nation has faith and reason and tolerance. That's why everybody from all walks of life try to come into our country, but nobody in our country tries to go to their countries. And it is about time that when we discuss immigration, we discuss what's in the best interest of this nation. It's about time when we discuss immigration, we talk about how people are going to be assimilated here and Americanized here. The idea that people escape these hellholes and then somehow those cultures, the equivalent of our culture, they're not.
Right. You mentioned the Judeo-Christian heritage, the foundation of this country. How great of a risk is it that we're currently seeing to our religious liberty in this country?
Well, there is a great risk. It actually started in the 1940s with some of the appointees to the Supreme Court by Franklin Roosevelt. You often hear people say, and the media will get confused by what I say because they're not particularly bright as a group. You'll hear people say separation of church and state. Now, hold on now. No, separation of church and state is not in the Declaration. It's not in the Constitution. It's in a letter that Jefferson wrote. I'm a big admirer of Jefferson. Jefferson was not at the Constitutional Convention. That's number one. Number two, what they meant by that is a theocracy.
Right.
We know what they meant. They told us what they meant. And if one of these Sunday show dress-up hosts would actually read a little bit of history, they would understand what this country was founded on. There's a reason why there's a free exercise clause in the First Amendment, and there's a reason why the other clauses in the First. The federal government is not supposed to establish a religion. What we have now, though, is the federal government as a religion.
Right.
Secularism has become a religion. And just as in Muslim countries they have these Sharia courts to enforce Sharia law, well, we have a Supreme Court that exists to enforce, apparently, secularism. That's not the Supreme Court's job.
In your opinion, what is the best way, and I know besides the elections and electing a constitutionalist.
I want to say hi to Sam Adams over here. Pleasure.
Beyond the elections and going back in time, let's talk about, I want to get your thoughts on our best way to protect our religious freedom. How do we protect that as people of faith who are concerned about the future of our country and the ability to exercise this, not within the four walls of a church, but as you know, religious freedom is the ability to live according to your faith. How do we best protect that?
By the way, I find most Christians just want to be left alone. Stop telling people what to do and how to live their lives. That's number one. If you think you're going to find salvation in the federal government, you're wrong. The federal government's the problem. I get callers who say, can't we bring a class action suit? First of all, most of the time, no, we can't. But where are we going to bring it? Who do you think these men in black robes are? Who do you think these women in black robes? I wrote a whole book on this. The Supreme Court's part of the problem. Yes. So the answer is, from my perspective, a different book. I'm not hawking it. It's called the Liberty Amendments. From the bottom up. Where the state legislatures, it's there in Article 5 of the Constitution, where the state legislatures have the power, acting together, to propose amendments to the Constitution of the United States. And I don't propose amendments to change the civil society. The 11 amendments I propose are to protect and restore the civil society. That's the way we do it. No department, no agency, no court, no president, no Senate, no House is going to do this for us. We have to do it for ourselves.
Speaking of books, you have a new book out, Plunder and Deceit. I have to tell you, I think, Mark, you write them faster than I can read books, but...
Trust me, it takes me 2 years. I'm not that fast.
Well, let's talk about Plunder and Deceit, obviously coming out at an important time as we go into the 2016 presidential election cycle. The focus of Plunder and Deceit.
Well, the focus is to try and make the most powerful, influential, persuasive case I can that we not only need to stand up against big, centralized, insatiable, leviathan, ubiquitous federal government, because it's the right thing to do if you support liberty. But if you love your children and grandchildren, you really need to stand up to protect them. Because this thing is devouring them. We have over $200 trillion in unfunded liabilities. We have over $18 trillion in fiscal operating liabilities. We do not have a border anymore. People are pouring over the border. The welfare state is expanding and imploding at the same time. This phony environmental movement is a degrowth leftist movement that was imported from Europe, which has as its purpose to destroy the capitalist system. And yes, you need free market capitalism in a free society, or you cease to be a free society. And what I try to explain in this book, in a definitive way, is that we're right, they're wrong. Now pass it on to your children.
What we have seen over the last almost 7 years from the Obama administration, can the damage that he's done to this country be undone by the next administration?
Not without a great leader. That's right. Not without a great leader. And there are a couple of people who are running who I think have the potential to start us down this road. Here's the problem. Tyranny takes one term of one president.
Right.
Liberty takes generations. Generations to protect and to reinstate. That's why history is filled more with examples of tyrants than liberators. That's why the American experiment is so precious and so unique, and we're so blessed to be here, many of us, and born here in this country almost by accident. And that's why we need to preserve it. That's our job. That's this generation's job. We must protect this society for the next generation. But I will tell you, it's going to be very difficult and complex. It is daunting. Because the problem is they're using the law to bastardize the law. That's right. They're using the law against us. Whether it's religious liberty, whether it's free speech, whether it's association, whether it's private property rights, all the things that the founders fought in order to ensure that we've had this wonderful nation. And I want to remind people, and I did this on my program the other day, when our men go into combat, and they carry that American flag into every single battle, and when you look at that memorial at Iwo Jima, where my grandfather fought, in Guadalcanal, and Guam, and you think about these things, and these men, when you look at the Vietnam War Memorial, or the Korean Memorial, or you think about these young 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, who are facing down the most vile enemy you can imagine. They're not there for food stamps. They're not there for entitlements. They're not there to advance some leftist agenda, redistribution of rights, or to protect the EPA and its global warming agenda. They are there to fight for liberty. Liberty. Liberty.
That liberty is not only at stake here in this country because of the enemies from within, but our enemies from within have aided our enemies from without. When we see what's happening in the Middle East, what do you foresee in the future, given what this administration has done with Iran and others in the Middle East?
I know it's Saturday morning, but so be it. It could be worse. I could be saying it at Sunday, you know. I think this administration has now planted the seeds of war. I think it's going to take a very strong president and commander-in-chief to undo what this president and this Congress have done to the United States of America and our allies. I don't think there's any question now that the regime in Tehran is going to get nukes. I don't think there's any question that their advanced ICBM program is going to build the capacity in 10, 15, 12 years for them to put nuclear warheads on missiles and hit our continent. And I think there's only going to be one way to stop that now. And this little tiny country of Israel has been warning us over and over and over and over and over again that this is Armageddon. It is Armageddon. And I'm telling you right now that what Barack Obama did and what this Congress did in surrendering the treaty power to stop him has sown the seeds of war. I really believe it. I don't want it to happen, but I think it's unavoidable. This is no agreement. This is a sham. This is a joke. Everybody knows it's a sham, and everybody knows it's a joke. And that may be Obama's legacy, but in the end, his legacy is war.
Have we put Israel into a position where they have to act unilaterally to protect themselves now?
They may have to, but look at the situation that little country's in. Now the Russians have moved into Syria.
Right.
Now the Israelis can take everybody else in the neighborhood. I don't think they can take the Russians by themselves. I mean, you're talking about 10, 12, 14 million people, tops, and I'm counting the children and the babies, too. The only positive I see there is the Gulf Arab states, their own survival is at stake. And I feel quite certain that the Israelis are working with the Egyptians and the Jordanians and vice versa, and even the Saudis and some of the others there. But the problem is we have this, I call this Islamo-Nazism for a reason. How can you not? When you see what's taking place over there, the debauchery, the joy and the nature of the torture, the routine decapitation, the enslavement of women, the rape of women, girls, little girls, Muslims to Muslims, the boys too. I mean, there's a long and how used to it our politicians and our media appear to be. It's just so disgusting and it is so appalling. So to answer your question is, what will the Israelis do? I don't know what they'll do. But what I would like them to do is follow us. And we bomb the enemy into smithereens. That's what I believe. And I know we have military technocrats all over the place who will say, you can't just do that. And I think back to World War II. And I think back to big wars that we won. What do you mean we can't and we don't and we won't? We can and we should.
So just in summary, then, you would say that Barack Obama's lead from behind strategy has failed?
I've never understood this phrase, lead from behind. He's just behind, so to speak.
Mark, any parting words of encouragement? I know you hear from people each and every day on your radio program, and when we look to Washington, D.C., there is a propensity and a reason to be discouraged, because what's coming out of this city, I believe, is not reflective, though, of what is happening across the nation. And as you talk to people across the nation, are you optimistic that Americans are ready to take this country back?
Here's what I'll say. What keeps me going is my family, my concern about future generations and our obligation, one to the next. And I also know there's tens of millions of us who think the same way. There are tens of millions of us who love this country. There are tens of millions of us who reject the things that are said about us by the president and said to us by Republican leaders. There are tens of millions of us who have a completely different value system than the reporters who claim to give us the news every night. And I figure if tens of millions of us will speak to our children and grandchildren, if tens of millions of us will try and influence one or two other people, at some point, some way, someday, we will muscle through this.
If those tens of millions will stand together, we can take this country back.
I think so.
Mark Levin, folks.
God bless you.